It does not know it is wrong. That is the critical fact. When an AI system generates a confident, detailed, entirely fabricated answer, it produces it with the same certainty as a true one. There is no internal signal of error, no hesitation, no flag. Over 3 chapters, we examine what this means for the systems we are building our world on top of. Chapter 1. The Confabulation. In 2023, a New York attorney named Schwartz filed a legal brief citing 6 prior court cases as precedent for his client's position. The cases were detailed, plausible, and consistently formatted in the style of genuine legal citations. They were also entirely fabricated. Every case name, every judge, every ruling had been invented by the AI legal research tool he had used to prepare the brief. When the opposing counsel could not locate the cases, Schwartz submitted a corrected filing, acknowledging that the citations had been generated by ChatGPT and that he had not verified them independently. Judge Cascade of the Southern District of New York sanctioned Schwartz and his firm $5,000 and ordered them to notify each of the fabricated judges who did not exist, that their names had been falsely attributed to non-existent rulings. This is hallucination. The term was borrowed from psychology, where it describes perception without a corresponding external stimulus, and applied to large language models to describe the generation of confident, fluent, coherent output that has no grounding in reality. The mechanism behind hallucination is not a bug in the conventional sense. It is an emergent property of how these systems work. A large language model learns, through training on vast quantities of text, to predict what the next token should be given everything that came before it. It is extraordinarily good at this. It has learned the statistical patterns of human language so deeply that it can produce text that is indistinguishable, in its surface characteristics, from text written by a knowledgeable expert. What it cannot do is verify whether the content it generates corresponds to facts in the world. It has no ground truth. It has no memory of sources. It has no ability to say, "I am not sure," in any meaningful sense, because uncertainty is not a state it can genuinely occupy. It can only produce the linguistic tokens associated with uncertainty without actually experiencing it. The result is a system that produces high-confidence wrong answers at a rate that varies dramatically by domain, by question type, by model version, and by phrasing, but never reaches 0. For legal citations, the error can be checked and exposed in a courtroom. The Schwartz case made the news precisely because the mechanism of verification still worked. The attorney was sanctioned. The fabrications were identified. The cases that do not make the news are the ones where the verification mechanism did not work. In Part 2, we examine what happens when hallucination enters systems where the verification happens too late. Case file. Part 2. The Cascade. When hallucination enters critical systems, the attorney was sanctioned. The fabrications were caught. That outcome required several things to go right simultaneously. Opposing counsel who checked the citations, a judge who took the violation seriously, and a legal system with paper trails that made verification possible. Now consider the domains where those conditions do not hold. In 2023, researchers at Stanford Medical School published an evaluation of large language model performance on medical questions. The models performed impressively on standard exam questions, the kind with clear right answers. Their performance on nuanced clinical reasoning questions was more concerning. On a subset of cases requiring integration of ambiguous evidence, the models produced confident recommendations that were wrong in ways a clinician could identify, but that a non-specialist might not. The concern is not the failure rate per se. Human clinicians also make errors. The concern is the nature of the failure. Human clinicians who are uncertain tend to express uncertainty. AI systems trained to be helpful tend to produce confident-sounding answers regardless of the underlying epistemic situation. The confident wrong answer is, in many medical contexts, more dangerous than the hesitant, uncertain answer. This failure mode is not unique to medicine. In 2023, Air Canada allowed a customer service chatbot to promise a bereavement fare refund that its actual policy did not offer. When the customer cited the chatbot's promise, Air Canada initially argued the chatbot was a separate legal entity responsible for its own statements. A civil tribunal rejected this. In financial services, AI systems used for due diligence and regulatory compliance are operating in environments where errors may not be discovered for months or years, and where the consequences compound over time. The Cascade failure is the scenario safety researchers worry about most. Not a single high-profile hallucination caught in a courtroom, but a stream of small, confident, wrong outputs that each pass individual review, that together constitute a systematic distortion of decision-making across an organization. No single wrong output is large enough to trigger a crisis. The system appears to be working. The errors accumulate in the decisions made on the basis of its outputs. By the time the cascade is visible, the distortion is already embedded in the organization's understanding of its own situation. In Part 3, we ask what trust looks like in a system where hallucination cannot be eliminated, only managed. Case File, Part 3, The Trust Gap. What verification means now. There is a principle in nuclear safety called defense in depth. It holds that no single safety system is sufficient. Safety comes from layers, redundant, independent mechanisms that can catch failures that slip through the layer before them. The philosophy acknowledges that failure is inevitable and that the response is not to make any single component perfect, but to design the system so that no single failure is catastrophic. The AI industry does not yet have a widely adopted equivalent. Most deployments of large language models in consequential domains operate with a single layer of human review, or increasingly, with no human review at all. The assumption is that the model is good enough, most of the time, in most cases. This is probably true. The question is what most of the time means when the system is operating at scale. A system that is wrong 1% of the time, processing 10,000 queries per day, generates 100 wrong outputs daily. If those outputs are in a domain where errors have consequences, and if no secondary verification mechanism catches them, the error rate of the system is not 1%. It is 100 errors per day, compounding. The verification problem is not solved by making the models more accurate. Even a model that is wrong 0.1% of the time, processing 10 million queries per day, generates 10,000 errors daily. Scale amplifies even very low error rates into operationally significant problems. What would genuine defense in depth look like for AI systems? First, domains with defined criticality levels, where outputs above a certain threshold require independent verification before action is taken. Second, logging and auditing systems that make it possible to reconstruct what an AI said and what decision was made on the basis of it. Third, institutional accountability frameworks that make clear who is responsible when an AI's output causes harm. None of these are technical problems. They are governance problems. The technology for logging, verification, and accountability exists. What does not exist in most organizations deploying AI at scale is the institutional commitment to implement them. We are building systems faster than we are building the structures to govern them. We know this because we have documented it. The incident reports are filed. The cases are adjudicated. The recommendations are written. And then, the product roadmap moves on. The system does not know it is wrong. It cannot know. That is not a limitation to be fixed in the next version. It is a structural property of how these systems produce output. The question worth sitting with: in a world where confident wrong answers are indistinguishable from confident right ones at the point of delivery, what does verification mean? And who is responsible for doing it? The free guide is in the description. 3 signs the system you are trusting is already working against you. Yours now. Subscribe. The next case file is already open.